On April 3, 2000, a man undergoing emergency heart surgery was told that, by all medical accounts, he should not have been alive. During the operation, his heart stopped, not once, but twice. What followed was not a single moment, but a sequence of experiences he later struggled to place within ordinary language. Sudden transitions away from the body, environments that felt complete and unfamiliar, encounters that did not rely on words, and a return marked by pain, interruption, and repetition. This documentary is based on a first-hand personal account, presented as remembered, without analysis or claims. April 3, 2000. For 3 years, his body had been failing in ways that did not announce themselves as danger. He could not walk very far without becoming exhausted. Any physical effort brought on a wave of sleep so heavy it felt uncontrollable. There was no dramatic pain, no collapse, just a steady narrowing of what his body would allow. When the tests were finally done, the doctor did not soften the language. 85% of one main heart artery was blocked. 95% of the other were closed. The doctor told him he should not stand up from the table. He said he could not be responsible for what might happen if he did. By all medical accounts, he should not have been alive. Emergency surgery was scheduled for the following morning. Before the operation, his girlfriend brought his children to the hospital to see him. His daughter asked him to wave when they were in the parking lot, because she knew which window belonged to his room. She wanted to see him one more time. He agreed. He never got the chance. The nurse gave him medication that took effect almost immediately. He was unconscious before his children reached the car. He never waved goodbye. That moment, he later said, stayed with him. It followed him into the operating room, and into what came next. If you're watching this, let us know where you're listening from. These stories travel farther than the people who lived them. When he died on the operating table the first time, he did not realize that he was dead. There was no sense of leaving his body, no tunnel, no darkness, no light waiting at a distance. There was no transition he could identify. One moment, there was nothing he could recall. The next, he was simply there. The place he found himself in did not resemble any physical location he had known, but it also did not feel abstract. It felt complete, as though it had always existed exactly as it was. Light was present, but not in a visual way. It did not come from a source. It did not cast shadows. It was something that surrounded and entered him at the same time. The senses did not operate separately. Sight, touch, taste, and emotion arrived together, led into a single impression that was overwhelming in its intensity. Words, he later said, were not built to carry this kind of information. They could only approximate it. What stood out first was the grass. It was so vividly green that it was almost painful to look at, yet looking at it felt wonderful. The color was not just seen, it was felt. When he touched the grass, the sensation carried flavor as well. He described it as tasting like watermelon, not because it literally did, but because the feeling carried sweetness and freshness at the same time. Walking on it felt effortless. The ground did not resist him. It welcomed him. The smell did not come through the nose. It moved through him, as if perception flowed through the bones of his face, through the spaces beneath the eyes. Everything was immersive. Nothing was distant. He did not feel enclosed in a body. He did not feel disembodied either. The question of having a body did not seem relevant there. He later struggled to explain where he felt positioned within that environment. The closest comparison he could make was a mudroom, a place that is not fully inside a house, but not outside either. A space of transition, a place where one prepares to move further in. Then he became aware of presences, 3 of them. They were not figures in the human sense. They did not approach or stand apart. They were simply there, emerging from the left side of an intensely green pine tree. Their presence carried color and sensation more than form. He associated them with yellow, but not the color of an object. More like the feeling of warmth, of sunlight, of a flame steady on a candle. With the color came a taste he associated with lemonade. They did not speak aloud. Communication did not arrive as sentences. It came as complete understanding, delivered all at once. The presence on his right conveyed a simple truth, without pressure or command. He could stay, or he could go back. If he went back, there was something unfinished. The decision did not feel like an order. It felt like recognition, as if something already set in motion required completion, and only he could do it. What held him, unexpectedly, was sadness. He remembered his children. He remembered that he had not waved goodbye. As much as he wanted to remain where he was, in a place that felt effortless, peaceful, and whole, that unfinished moment pulled at him. He needed to go back, not because he was forced to, because something in him would not allow him to stay otherwise. The choice was made, and with it, the return began. He did not come back by accident. If you're listening to Why, subscribe, because leaving now means missing what the return costs. The return is abrupt. There is no transition, no slowing, no warning. One moment, he is surrounded by a sense of calm so complete it feels natural. Next, he is inside his body again. Pain arrives first, not gradually, not as discomfort, as a force. He becomes aware of pressure in his chest, deep and invasive. His ribs are spread apart. Instruments are inside him. He hears shouting, sharp, urgent voices, but cannot place them. The sounds do not arrive as language yet. They arrive as a threat. There is a pulling sensation in his chest, a mechanical rhythm. Suction. He sees blood being drawn away from his body. He cannot move. He cannot speak. He cannot breathe. His left arm and leg feel as though they are burning. Later, he will understand that veins have been taken from those places for the bypass. In this moment, it feels like fire running along the length of his limbs. Someone presses down on his chest. The pain is unbearable. He tries to escape it, but there is nowhere to go. And then, just as suddenly as the pain began, it stops. There is a brief sensation of release, a single moment of separation, and then he is gone again. Not drifting, not traveling, just gone. The operating room disappears. The sounds collapse. The body falls away, and he is back on the other side. But this time, something is different. He did not arrive somewhere new. It was the same place he had just left, but he was no longer fully inside it. The environment was recognizable, yet altered in a way that was difficult to define. The completeness he had felt before was muted, as though a thin boundary now existed between himself and the space around him. He was aware of the place, but not immersed in it. The sense of being welcomed, of belonging without effort, was gone. What remained was observation. Sensation was still present, but less overwhelming. The fusion of sight, touch, taste, and emotion had softened. Colors were still vivid, but no longer enveloping. The grass was still impossibly green, but it did not respond to him in the same way. It no longer felt reciprocal. Where before the ground had seemed alive beneath him, now it felt distant, like something remembered rather than inhabited. Time still held no meaning here, but now there was a sense of pause, not urgency, but suspension. He was no longer moving freely within the space. He was waiting. It was in this diminished stillness that the presences became apparent again. They did not emerge or approach. They simply registered within awareness, the same three concentrations of yellow presence he had encountered before. They carried no shape, no outline, no human features. Their presence was defined by quality rather than form, or warmth without heat, attention without judgment, familiarity without identity. Yellow here was not a visual color. It was a feeling. The emotional tone of sunlight through leaves. The steadiness of a flame that does not flicker. With it came the same association he would later struggle to explain, a sensation he likened to the taste of lemonade, not because of flavor, but because of freshness and clarity. Communication did not unfold as dialogue. Understanding arrived all at once. He was made aware that the choice still existed, but it was no longer open-ended. Remaining was no longer an option freely available to him. The space itself reflected this limitation. He was not being rejected, but he was no longer being received. Alongside this realization came another. Returning was not framed as punishment, obligation, or failure. It was framed as a continuation. Something incomplete had been set in motion, and his presence here could not extend beyond that unfinished thread. Then the memory surfaced again. His children. Not abstractly, not emotionally softened. The moment returned exactly as it was, the promise to wave, the certainty that he would, and the fact that he never did. That unfulfilled goodbye carried weight here in a way it had not before. It was not guilt. It was consequence. If he stayed, that moment would remain unresolved. The contrast was sharp. On one side, the stillness and peace of this place. On the other, the pull of a life that was unfinished, not because it lacked meaning, but because it still contained it. The decision was not debated, it was recognized. And with that recognition, the space receded further, not violently, not abruptly, but with quiet finality. He was no longer being held there. This is where many viewers disengage. If you don't want to be one of them, subscribe and keep going. The return did not feel gradual. It was abrupt and violent, as though awareness had been forced back into a space it no longer fit. Pain arrived first, sharp and overwhelming, followed by sound and pressure. He became aware of the operating room again, the brightness of the lights, the urgency in the voices, the physical invasion of the surgery itself. He could feel his chest open, the instruments working inside him, the suction pulling blood away. Breathing was impossible. Every sensation registered at once, without any buffer. Then, just as suddenly, he was gone again. There was no passage, no transition. He simply found himself back in the same other place, but something had changed. The intensity was muted, as though he were only partially present. He later described it as being 90% there and 10% somewhere else, aware that he was no longer fully allowed in. The environment felt flatter, less immersive, like a reflection rather than the source itself. He was no longer standing in the threshold freely. He was waiting. It was then that he became aware of someone familiar. His grandmother, Meme, was there. She did not appear as she had in the later years of her life, but as she had been in her youth, vibrant, healthy, and unmistakably herself. Recognition was immediate and emotional. Of all the people he could have encountered, it was her presence that felt most grounding. She had been the one person in his life who had loved him without condition, without expectation, without needing him to be anything other than who he was. That love was instantly present again, unchanged. His first impulse was to ask why they were in the same place. She had been deeply religious. He had not. Yet here they were, together, without contradiction or explanation needed. Before he could fully form the question, she communicated to him that he could not stay. There was no anger in it, no sadness, only certainty. He objected immediately. The pain of the body was still vivid in his awareness, and the idea of returning to it felt unbearable. He wanted to remain where he was, where pain did not exist, where peace felt natural. She told him she would go back with him. He reached for her, wanting to hug her, but contact did not work the way it does in the physical world. It was as though she were enclosed within a delicate boundary, close enough to feel, but not to hold. Still, the connection was unmistakable. He later described it as understanding that a hug is only a small percentage physical, and that the rest exists elsewhere. That was what he felt then, the fullness of connection without the need for form. And then he was back in the operating room again. This time, something was different. The pain that had overwhelmed him moments before was gone. Above the surgical lights, he saw another light, brighter, distinct, and unmistakably separate from the equipment. He knew, without reasoning, that it was her. At that moment, his arm lifted involuntarily and struck one of the doctors. He heard someone shout that he was back. The urgency in the room intensified as they resumed their efforts to stabilize him. He remained aware during this time, aware that she was there with him, shielding him from the pain, smiling at him. The suffering that should have been present simply wasn't. It was as though it had been absorbed, redirected, carried by someone else. Eventually, the surgery continued without interruption. When he later woke during recovery, the physical ordeal was over, but something inside him had shifted permanently. Depression settled in heavily in the days that followed. He did not want to be here, not because he wished to die, but because he had experienced a place where existence felt complete in a way life now did not. At the same time, his children anchored him. He knew he would stay for them. That knowledge did not erase the longing, but it gave it structure. And slowly, as healing progressed, understanding began to surface. He knew he had come back for a reason, not as a command, not as a punishment, but as an agreement. And that agreement had not yet been fulfilled. Recovery was slow, not just physically, but internally. His body healed in stages, but his sense of belonging did not return with it. In the weeks that followed the surgery, he found himself caught between two realities. One was the ordinary world, hospital rooms, medication schedules, conversations that felt strangely distant. The other was the place he could not forget, the place that felt more real than anything he had ever known before. Depression settled in quietly. It wasn't despair in the usual sense. It was not hopelessness or self-pity. It was grief. A deep, persistent grief for a place where pain did not exist, where meaning was immediate, where love was not conditional or earned. He did not want to die, but he did not want to be here either. The only thing that anchored him was his children, the promise he had made, to return, to say goodbye properly, to remain, still held. As his strength returned, so did fragments of understanding. He did not come back empty-handed. The sense that followed him was not a list of instructions or a clear voice telling him what to do. It was more like a pressure, a quiet insistence that something unfinished now required his attention. He describes it as knowing he had agreed to something before returning, even if he could not fully remember the terms. The agreement was not about belief, religion, or conversion. It was about service. Children kept appearing in his thoughts. Not symbolically, not abstractly. Very specifically, he began to understand that whatever he was meant to do next had something to do with creating a space for them, a place of safety, imagination, and belonging. This understanding did not arrive logically. It surfaced gradually, through intuition rather than planning. His rational mind resisted it. The town was small. The idea made no financial sense. There was no clear demand. But the pull remained. Then, in June of 2002, it happened. He stepped out of a pizza shop he had never visited before and noticed an empty storefront across the street. As he stood there, the resistance fell away. He described seeing children everywhere, not physically standing there, but present in his awareness, as if the space itself already belonged to them. The sense was immediate and unmistakable. This was it. The next day, he rented the space. On June 22, 2002, the summer solstice, the doors opened. He called it Cody's Castle. It became a place where children gathered, not just to play games, but to feel seen, protected, and valued. He did not advertise it as a mission. He did not frame it spiritually. But he knew, internally, that this was part of what he had agreed to when he chose to return. He was not trying to save anyone. He was simply creating a place where something good could happen. Only later did he realize how much had changed in him. He noticed that he perceived people differently now. He sensed emotional states without being told. He became aware of suffering before it was spoken. Sometimes this awareness was subtle. Other times it was overwhelming. He did not seek these experiences out, and he did not fully understand them, but they persisted. He describes it as being more permeable than before, less insulated from the inner lives of others. Still, he said little about what he had experienced. For a long time after the surgery, he did not talk about what happened. Not because he had forgotten it, because saying it out loud made it feel exposed, fragile, too easily reduced to coincidence, imagination, or recovery room confusion. The experience felt complete on its own, sealed in a place that did not require explanation. But eventually, the pressure to speak outweighed the fear of being dismissed. When he finally described the experience publicly for the first time, something shifted. Not immediately, not dramatically, but in a way that felt external, as though the act of speaking had unlocked a sequence already in motion. About a week later, late at night, he was sitting alone at his computer. It was after 2 a.m. He had no reason to be awake, no plan, no expectation of anything unusual. He entered an online chat room casually, the way people do when they are restless but not searching for anything in particular. A pop-up window appeared on the screen. Normally, he ignored them. Always did. But this time, without thinking, he clicked. The moment he did, he felt it. A sudden sensation, sharp, electrical, traveling from the keyboard, up through his hand and arm, and into his body. Not painful, not pleasant, just unmistakable. As though contact had been made. The woman on the other side of the screen told him she had also had a near-death experience. This alone was unusual, but what followed felt less like conversation and more like compulsion. He found himself asking questions he would never normally ask. Personal questions. Immediate questions. He asked for her phone number. She gave it to him. He asked for her address. She gave that too. Nothing about this felt voluntary. He did not weigh the decision. He did not hesitate. He did not stop to consider how irrational it was. He got into his car and started driving. He had never been to her town before. He did not use directions, yet he arrived without difficulty, as if the route had already been laid out for him. When she opened the door, she assumed, understandably, that he had come for reasons he did not share. He told her he was not there for that. He told her he was there to deliver a message. He said that within 24 hours, something devastating would happen and that she would need help to survive it. He said he had been sent, not by choice, but by necessity, to give her something she would need. She did not fully understand what he meant. Neither did he. Without ceremony, without preparation, he placed one hand in front of her chest and the other behind it, near her heart. What happened next was not symbolic. It was physical. Both of them felt it. An intense transfer of energy moved from him into her, forceful, directional, unmistakable. He described it as wind, but structured, almost geometric. The sensation raised the hair on his arms. His body reacted before his mind could catch up. He told her the energy was not his to keep, that he was only the messenger. As the moment passed, she stepped away to take her medication. She was diabetic. While she prepared an injection, the phone rang. They both knew. The call was about her mother. She was in intensive care. Critical. The news landed with force. She began to cry. She asked him to take her to the hospital. He said he could not. Not because he did not care, but because he knew, with complete certainty, that this part she had to do alone. That his role had already been fulfilled. Then something else happened. As she stood holding the syringe, her body froze. Completely still. For several seconds, she could not move. He later realized she had intended to end her life with the overdose. He told her she could not do that now. He told her she carried something new. In that moment, she changed. The despair receded. Her posture shifted. It was as if an internal barrier had been erected, something stabilizing, protective. She gathered her things and prepared to leave, focused, composed, purposeful. When he left her home and began the drive back, exhaustion overtook him. He had not slept in days. His body should have been depleted. Instead, he felt restored, as if something had been returned to him as well. He did not interpret this as proof. He did not claim certainty. He only noted that the experience that began on an operating table did not remain there. It extended forward, intersecting with other lives in ways he could not have planned or predicted. The near-death experience did not end when his heart restarted. It continued, quietly, unpredictably, into the life that followed. And whether that continuation was psychological, spiritual, or something else entirely, one thing was clear to him. Coming back was not the end of the story. Years later, when he looks back on the surgery, the operating room no longer feels like the center of the story. It was only the threshold. What mattered more was what followed, how the experience refused to stay contained, how it continued to surface in moments that did not announce themselves as spiritual or extraordinary. Conversations, encounters, decisions that felt less chosen than aligned. He does not claim to understand what happened to him. He does not insist that others interpret it the same way he does. He only maintains that something fundamental shifted when his heart stopped, and that whatever he encountered did not erase the world he returned to, but reframed it. Life became less about accumulation, certainty, or control, and more about responsibility, connection, and timing. He learned that some experiences do not arrive to answer questions. They arrive to rearrange them. Whether what he encountered was a place, a state of consciousness, or something the human mind cannot yet categorize, it left him with one enduring certainty: death did not feel like an ending. It felt like a transition, one that did not erase identity, memory, or care for those left behind. For this channel, the story does not stand as evidence or explanation. It stands as a record. One account among many, one voice describing what it felt like to cross a line and to come back carrying something that could not be fully set down again. The question it leaves behind is not what happened to him. It is what it means that so many people, across time, culture, belief, and circumstance, describe moments like this, quietly, consistently, and often at great personal cost. And whether those moments are pointing toward an afterlife, a deeper structure of consciousness, or something still unnamed, they continue to ask the same thing of us: to listen carefully, to remain honest about what we do not know, and to acknowledge that whatever happens after death, the way people live after returning may be the most revealing part of all. If this resonated, feel free to leave a thought below, and if you'd like to keep exploring these stories, subscribing helps you find your way back.